If not, let's give a big round of applause for this outstanding panel.
At this time, we will take a 15-minute break, reconvene at 10. Thank you.
Laura, thank you.
I like that.
Discuss the nexus between water quantity, ag drainage, water quality, saltancy, and environmental health impacts. With that said, I would want to introduce to you our moderator for this panel, Supervisor Luis Blancarte.
Thank you, Miguel. Good morning, everybody. First, I want to thank each and every single one of you for being here today. Let me make sure I put this water where I'm not going to lose it. I know some of you have very busy schedules and have set those aside to be here. We hope that it is well worth your being here. For those of you that have traveled, we are also very thankful for participating. Some time ago, before the QSA, for every 6 acre-feet of water that was used in the agricultural process, about 2 acre-feet would result in drainage, most of which would end up in the Salton Sea. Due to a combination of on-farm water conservation measures and water transfers pursuant to the QSA, there is a significant less runoff number that is going to the Salton Sea. Since less runoff is going into the sea, there's an increase in the concentration of some water pollutants going to the sea. There is also more exposed sea playa that is highly emissive of air pollutants, which have an adverse impact in everybody's health. Less water has also made the Salton Sea restoration efforts extremely difficult, and the implementation of the Natural Resources Agency's Salton Sea Management Program has become very, very challenging. Unfortunately, there is currently not enough runoff going to the Salton Sea to keep the sea at previous levels. Subsequently, there is an added concern about more exposed playa, the sea's water quality getting worse, and there is less and less runoff every time that we see this. To discuss the concerns, we've invited representatives from state and local regulatory agencies and local environmental justice and community-based organizations. So at this time, I don't know the other moderators what pattern they have been following, but I'm going to ask each of you to please introduce yourself, and then after you do the introductions, we'll go ahead and start with the first question.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for the invitation. Is it on? Yeah. Hi, good morning. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Belen Leon Lopez. I work for the Air Pollution Control District. I'm the Assistant Air Pollution Control Officer. I've been at the district just about 15 years. And we do a lot of permitting, enforcement, planning, and we work close with the federal, state, and local government in order for us to enforce our rules and regulations.
Thank you.
Hey, good morning, and thank you for the invitation. My name is Jeff Lamore. I'm the Deputy Director of the Public Health Department. I administer the Environmental Health Division of Environmental Health. We have about 15 programs within environmental health, about 28 staff. I've been with the division for going on 25 years now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Paula Rasmussen. I'm with the Colorado River Basin Regional Water Quality Control Board. We are a state regulatory agency. There are 9 regional boards statewide, and our region covers most of Riverside, San Bernardino, Imperial, and a part of San Diego County.
Thank you for hosting this. Good morning. My name is Daniel Garcia. I am at Comité Cívico del Valle. I'm the Community Research and Engagement Coordinator. We are an environmental justice organization based here locally, and we're focused, obviously on the environmental health aspect, and I'm also a PhD candidate in the Boston College Sociology Department.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you very much. I'll start with the first question, and we'll start with the Regional Water Board, if I may. Can you please share what the board is doing to protect the Salton Sea's beneficial uses and to address some of the water problems that we are facing? And it's a two-part question. I can ask you, I can stop here, or if you wish, I can ask them both.
Stop there.
Okay.
Yeah, regarding the Salton Sea, the regional board our focus is water quality. And to be clear, there's a distinction between the regional boards and the state board. The State Water Resources Control Board is the agency that monitors water usage and the drought. So our focus is on water quality. Now, the regional board has a basin plan, which is basically a master plan that looks at the waters in the region and determines what the quality is and what the issues are. Every 3 years, we do a review of the basin plan and determine what needs there are and what the priorities are for the coming years. In the last basin plan review that we did a couple of years ago, we prioritized the Salton Sea and environmental justice as our priorities. And in so doing, we identified a series of actions or plans that we needed to take relating to the Salton Sea. We developed what we call water quality control plans. And those are plans that look at a specific pollutant and determines if there are impacts to that pollutant and defines what needs to be done. And we have several of those plans on our list right now that are currently under development on the tributaries to the Salton Sea. For example, for the New River, the Alamo River, and the Whitewater River that flows from the Whitewater Basin. In addition to the water quality plans, because those are a long-term exercise, we need to gather data, look at the quality of the water, and develop a plan that is then adopted by the board. And then those plans are implemented through our permits and through our other actions at the water board. And so for waters that flow into the Salton Sea through the tributaries, any water that is used is regulated. So you will have permits on those waters. We recently put in place general orders, which are permits for the irrigated lands. So the Imperial Valley just was enrolled in a general order recently, as also the Coachella Valley. So those general orders basically require monitoring of the flows and best management practices to reduce pollutants. In addition to those orders, we have permits on sewage treatment plants and regulated industries. So there are quite a few things that we do.
Wow, very interesting. And so as your agency engages in some of these orders or plans that they are doing, what is the final goal that your agency is looking to accomplish? What's the end game?
Our ultimate goal is when you touch water and you use it to make sure that the water that goes back is clean. Anybody who uses the water, ultimately that's what we're looking for.
Very clear direction. I like that. Thank you. The next question is going to be for the Air District. And for this one, I also have a two-part question. First, what is the district doing and proposes to do to address the air quality problems and the non-attainment status of the air standards associated with the sea?
The Imperial County Air Pollution Control District is working directly with the property owners and the state in order to mitigate the sea by enforcing our rules and regulations. We also have a monitoring network that we work with the state and CARB in order for us to get a better idea of what issues are around the sea and how we could pursue for better health and better air quality. We're also working with as the water recedes, there's going to be a lot of open areas around the sea. So that's when we speak to the property owners in order to see how they're going to mitigate. So we try to make an accordance with them to see how we could mitigate that area. The water is receding fairly fast. A lot of the property owners a lot of the area does belong to IID, but there's a lot of smaller property owners around the sea. So we have to work with everybody in order to see how to mitigate the sea.
So as your agency implements policies, rules, perhaps corrective actions, what is the district doing in the long-term plan to attempt to protect the health of all these vulnerable residents?
We work with a lot of grants, and those grants are for us to protect the health of the residents, and also to provide projects that will mitigate dust, right? A lot of the projects that we receive right now is for like school filtration systems at schools. We've done over 54 schools with air filtration systems. You would say in the corridor right now, which is Calexico, Heber, and El Centro. We also have done Westmoreland, Sealy, and Calipat. And we do intend to do the North Shore, which is more broadly up to the Salton Sea. So we are working on focusing on the children, focusing on schools in order to do this. We are also doing buses. So a lot of the older buses, they're being replaced by newer buses with these type of grant programs. That's what we're focusing on schools. For other type of projects, we're doing a lot of paving and urban greening projects. For instance, here at the ICOE, the front lawn, that was one of the projects that was approved. It looks really nice. But we also do invest to see if they're able to provide water and maintenance to this type of urban greening. It's not just that giving out trees and then not being maintained. They have to be maintained, they have to have water source, and they have to have a project, long-term project, about 10 years. There were 7 projects with urban greens around the area, and there were 6 projects for paving projects. Other districts don't realize how important paving is down here. There's a lot of schools that do not have a paving parking lot. So a lot of parents are parking and idling in spaces that are not paved. So we are taking care of the spaces through local funds. This is not a grant that comes from the state or comes from federal. They're local grants that we use in order to mitigate. It's not only paving the schools, it's also paving public parks. Sorrel Park was one of them. The softball park over on La Brucherie was another one, and I could name a lot more. And this is the type of projects that we need down here in the district in order for us to help mitigate dust, right, in particular. We continue working with a program that's AB 617 that's brought over $14 million for us to do projects here in the valley as well. So we continue to leverage money, we continue to seek funding, we continue to work with the communities in order to see their needs. We are listening to the communities to see what type of projects they need, not the type of projects that we think they need, but the projects that they are requesting that they need. So yes, we're working a lot with the community in order to do mitigation projects.
Thank you. You touched a little bit on buses. I was very excited to find out that we actually have electric buses working. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, through a state program, Brawley received 3 electric buses, and I believe other school districts are receiving buses at this time. However, again, through our program, local program, state program, we are also going to do electric buses that includes the infrastructure. So it's not only them getting an electric bus, but how are they going to connect it, right? How are they going to charge it? So we are including also the infrastructure for these type of school buses. At this time, it's only school buses, but we do intend to go more into public.
Excellent. I think Comité Cívico can help with charging stations eventually, huh?
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Next, let's talk about environmental health. And for you, I have a kind of a 3-part, so we can get into that. What role does the county's Division of Environmental Health play in the monitoring, reporting, and mitigation efforts going on at the Salton Sea?
Sure. So environmental health, as it pertains to the Salton Sea, we're not coming from an enforcement perspective, more as an advisory agency. We definitely partner up with our local, state, and federal agencies, act as a technical advisor as well with regards to different reports and the studies that are done. We definitely participate in a number of community forums such as this, committee meetings, more so specifically to Salton Sea and New River, working very closely with the IBWC and Cal EPA and Fed EPA with regards to activities associated with New River, effluent coming in from Mexico and down the tributary into Salton Sea. So we have a very active role in all that aspects. We also look at plans. We look at drought management activities that could impact our community. So we're trying to look ahead and try to plan ahead with regards to making sure that we have plans in place to help our community members. We have a number of residents that are on well water, primarily on the west end of the county and in the East Mesa and the East End and the Bard area. But we're constantly looking at and how we can improve or at least address, monitor, look at water quality issues. We do quite a bit of sampling. We started a sampling program along New River, and obviously we're looking at water quality that ultimately conveys into Salton Sea and how that is being managed. Establishing baselines. The Water Board has done, they have extensive research and have done extensive studies and sampling over the years. So we want to pick that up just to continue to monitor that. Just recently, earlier this year, we've expanded that program. Primarily, we're looking at bacteria. Now we've added SOCs to our panel that we're monitoring for. So that's a key thing. We're kind of again looking at water quality data coming through. The other things that we're also involved in is harmful algal blooms. So we're looking at the health of Salton Sea. We're looking at areas where algae mats are being formed, or we're looking at water quality issues associated with HAB, and ensuring and notifying the public when we do encounter situations where samples have been collected and high cyanotoxins have been identified. Making sure that the public's aware of those, so we have a reporting system, and we're also in the process of actually setting up a posting signs and making sure the public is aware of those that recreate still. There's still people that are very active in Salton Sea, so ensuring that not only the individuals but their animals, so they are protected as well. So those are just some programs in general that we've been looking at.
Thank you very much. Among the programs that you do administer, are there any concerns where you could be given more latitude, where perhaps your agency can get, let me give you an example, the receding shoreline, right? Where can be more cognizant of what your agency is doing and help work within that frame?
Sure. I know in 2019 and into 2020, we were looking, or we did propose, there's been a study that was done, it's been about a decade or two ago, on emissive soils. As the shoreline recedes, there's emissive soils, and trying to understand and to develop a baseline of the toxicity of those emissive soils. We did put the proposal together that was forwarded to the state and the feds to see if we can secure funding to do further analysis of emissive soils that come off or that could become airborne along the shoreline. So that, I think, is one area that we definitely want to focus on to see, again, establishing that baseline. Air quality is very important. The impacts to the surrounding community to Salton Sea is also very important to ensure that they're being protected. We understand what's currently there toxicity-wise in the soils, and then how those soils impact the community as we have inclement weather. We have storm events, winds, and things like that could carry those soils, and how far those soils are in those are being carried in the community. Is it just, is it a matter of a few yards? Is it traveling, hundreds of yards? What are we seeing, and how is it impacting? So yes, that's an area we can definitely focus in. That's an area that we've been pushing for a couple of years to see more studies being conducted in.
Thank you. And my last question would focus more on the long-term plans that Public Health Department and Environmental Health have for continuing to move forward.
Primarily, for now, I mean, again, looking at drought contingency, looking at health impacts to the surrounding communities in our basin areas, working closely with the Air District and the Water Board, and again, looking at water quality studies as well, and again, what are the health effects, what's the health of the sea, and how, what impacts could be created. Also, we're looking at vector-borne issues. So we have vector-borne diseases that are of concern. I also oversee vector control. So we have a number of, we've expanded our surveillance activities around the county. We have traps in around the Salton Sea. We're looking at the refuge areas, and we're seeing what diseases are coming in. What do we currently have, and what emergent diseases are also coming in. So as the sea continues to recede, we have areas where there's still groundwater that's coming up. It becomes stagnant and becomes a perfect breeding source for mosquitoes. So wanting to understand, trying to get out, trying to be proactive in identifying those sources, identifying if these sources are breeding, and more importantly, if there's disease associated with that, and if so, how are we managing that?
Thank you very much. Our last panelist is with Comité Cívico del Valle, which is an advocacy group that is well established and is very effective at educating on public health and the environment. Your organization also collects air quality data at various locations throughout the valley. I think you also collect data from south of the border in some cases. What are some of the key measures that various agencies and industries can take to protect those that are most vulnerable in the valley?
Yes, thank you for the question. So I think it's important to contextualize, right, when we're thinking about vulnerability, right? There's a particular definition when we're thinking about social vulnerability, right? It's the ability to anticipate, recover from, get information about a particular environmental hazard. So social environmental vulnerability can be indicated by English learner status, immigrant status, homeowner status, race, age, gender, right? The list goes on and on. It's also important to note that the social vulnerability in the United States has decreased since the 1960s. However, the U.S.-Mexico borderlands has remained socially vulnerable. So Imperial County, everyone here knows very, very well. It has that right, that distinction of being a particularly vulnerable location. In terms of trying to conceptualize what key measures would look like and what metrics we could use to gauge where we are, I think clearly deferring to the air quality monitoring, right, is our best bet in terms of expansion of these air quality monitors across the valley, and in particular communities and neighborhoods where residents know more than the so-called experts that there's a problem, and so I think air is one aspect, and also monitoring what the recession rate of the playa is, the exposure rate of the playa in the coming years. So those are two, I think, discrete, distinct measures that we're looking at closely.
Thank you for sharing that. So of the ones, those are some of the ones that are being done right now. Is there some initiatives that you would like to engage in or begin looking at, and what would those be?
Yeah, I think Mrs. Lopez earlier in the morning mentioned about preparing the workforce, right, for this industry that's coming up in the valley, the Lithium Valley. And I think clearly that's one aspect of preparing the community. I think also we need the infrastructure in place. We need more infrastructure. I mean, we're talking about drought and, less consumption. Well, some people here in the valley don't have quality access to water, ready access to water, et cetera, et cetera. So I think a good starting point is to think about these things in terms of, right, the context, right? So we need the structure in place so that people can make and have the agency to make the right decisions, to inform themselves, to inform their communities, right? Our slogan at Comité is informed people build healthy communities, and that is our ethos. And so we're very much engaged in outreach, right, education engagement as part of the COE program. And so we want to see an expansion of that. So we want not only, let me just say this, we're going to be thinking big. Yeah, we're at a time of crisis. Some scholars say that the Colorado River is one of the first victims of climate change, and so climate change is water change. And so we're gonna really have big ideas in terms of how this can transform the valley. You know, there's this juxtaposition where we're one of the most productive regions in the country vis-a-vis food production, yet we don't see this reflected in this exceptional status reflected in the community at large, right? In fact, we're in the poorest county in California. Second, I think the literacy rate is very low too. I think up there, obviously El Centro has the highest unemployment rate in the nation, and this is how environmental justice views the environment, right? It's somewhere where we live, work, and play. It's not just this material, abstract nature or something. It's far more holistic. And so we want to see big things happen. We want to see infrastructure in place for water. We want to see more funding, obviously, for the air quality monitors, as I mentioned. We need more public health centers, cooling stations as well. We need to shore up our drinking water supply system, working obviously with the IAD. Education is also a big part of this as well. So we want funds for curricular development in the schools to make it a standardized portion of the local education, because informed people build healthy communities.
Thank you. Some very ambitious and worthwhile plans for all of us in the region. I think this is the part where we go to questions from the public. We have some on this side over here. And do you borrow a microphone?
That one? Nice. Who's got 6? Hi, Lance Hicks again. A little off base. First, I want to thank Jeff Lamore's office for taking care of the mosquitoes at my house. Awesome job. I call and they're there the next day. No problems. Thank you. My next question, a little bit off base, but environmentally health. I just want to know this answer. We know that the Salton Sea is full of planes, trains, and live ordinances. Tens of thousands of ordnance was dropped there. A lot of it's still live from the Army, Navy, all the activity there. As the water's receding, we're going to see planes exposed. We're going to see live ordnance come out, especially around the edges where we had the nuclear testing out there for the nuclear bombs. So my question is, and maybe to Jeff, maybe not, is it an environmental concern to you as these ordinances start to expose and maybe come into play?
Sure. It definitely could be a concern. Again, as the sea recedes, there's going to be areas that are obviously more shallow. We still have families, individuals recreating on the lake. And so as they are boating across the lake, it's very possible that can become a safety issue. We'll definitely have to work with our state and federal partners to identify those areas that are shallow, where there could be, whether it be ordnance or whether it be other objects that are a safety issue that need to be removed. So, we look to the landowners, work with our state and federal partners to address that. But yes, that's definitely would be a concern.
Thank you. And I think perhaps I don't recall if it should be the next panel. You'll have representatives there from the Salton Sea Authority as well. That might be a question that they might wish to tackle, or the Torres Martinez tribe as well. Next question.
Yes, good morning. Gary Redfern, Imperial Valley Press. The word was dropped during the ag panel. The one that nobody wants to hear is fallowing. And this question would be first for Ms. Rasmussen, and then also for possibly Mr. Garcia. It looks like there, will be in some way or another fallowing, even if not permanent fallowing. They were talking about, not irrigating second crops and maybe less summer, forage crops. So those, even if it's not permanent fallowing, it's like there could be seasonal fallowing. And obviously fallowing, as fields not growing in that, equals dust. And I know we already get hammered from EPA and Cal EPA on dust. So the word here, is more dust. So, how does air pollution control work to mitigate that? I mean, I know there's a struggle already to battle the dust that's already there. So that would be a question for air pollution control is, it's already a problem, so how is that going to be mitigated if it's more of a problem? And then, for Mr. Garcia, would be, that's obviously a quality of life issue. You have air monitors. If you have more fallowed fields, you're going to have more dust in the air, you're going to have more particulate matter, and we already have a serious asthma problem. So how does that get addressed on the social justice side? And I'll just play moderator here. I'll just ask Ms. Rasmussen to go first, and then Mr. Garcia. Thank you.
The regional board is really not directly involved with fallowing. That would be as a result of the water cutbacks and any restrictions on water use. Thank you.
All right, more moderator training for you before we give you the microphone again.
As long as it gets it right at IV Press, we're okay. As long as we're enforcing our rules and regulations, in particular at the Salton Sea, the Rule 804, which is open areas, and this is what I meant when the water is receding, there's a lot of property owners that we have to address too, right? Right now it's covered, it's not an issue. However, when it does recede, the property owners are addressed. We do contact them and let them know how they're going to mitigate that dust. Rule 804 has a menu of items that they could choose from in order for them to mitigate. I'm not saying it's cost effective, but some of them are. Like for instance, it says here that they could do vegetation, which is something that it's happening at the Salton Sea as we speak. There's a combination of water and dust suppressants that could be used as well. So sometimes that's more affordable or more cost-effective, for property owners that have smaller areas in the Salton Sea. They also apply paving, maintain the gravel, maintain chemical stabilizers. I mean, there is a menu that we have in our rules and regulations, and as long as we enforce those, we'll be mitigating the Salton Sea. And there's a lot of enforcement going on over at the Salton Sea area as well.
Yeah, I was talking about farm fields because they're talking about, less water. They may have to fallow fields either permanently or seasonally, and obviously fallowed fields means more dust, and we're already battling dust. So the question was basically, I understand the Salton Sea, but with water, I'm saying if you have more farmers fallowing more fields, that's more dust. You're already struggling with dust. Is there a way to address that? I mean, is there anything that can be done if we're fallowing more fields?
Yes, even agricultural department, they have their own rules and regulations that they have to follow with dust suppressants that they have to apply. But it's a lot, you have to call the Air Pollution Control District and have a meeting with them so they could do the permits and see what is allowed over at the agricultural area because of fallowing. And I understand that a lot of them are not utilizing the fields for crops or anything like that. They're just, leaving them without, but they also have credits that they could use like for not burning and stuff like that. Dust is going to be a big issue with agriculture. I understand that. And however, following the rules and regulations, we do have a report where they are provided when they submit for a permit, and they also have a menu of options in order for them to mitigate the dust at their agricultural area.
Thank you. Mr. Garcia?
Thank you. As agriculture is the lifeblood of our county, we want to see an instance where we work together clearly, not taking such an adversarial stance as perhaps in the past. Just in terms of, dust mitigation in the abstract, clearly, we want to codify into policy, different green investitures, right? So in terms of actual, canopy, tree planting, other technologies that are on at the forefront. I think of all the different stuff that's going on. But at the end of the day, whether it's a fallowed field or just dust in general, from the valley, we're trying to mitigate that across the board with green investments, right? By codifying, as I mentioned, hopefully this into any legislation or policies that come into place. And so, yeah, that's my answer.
Thank you. Any additional questions from the public? We have one over on this side.
Hi, good morning. A question for Ms. Lopez. Regarding fallowed lands, the question is coming up that farmers will have to fallow more fields. The Imperial County has some of the highest asthma rates in California. 1 in 4 of our children have asthma. And so, as an organization, Comité Cívico, as CBOs, we do a lot of, we have asthma programs, we have information, we have a connection with families. But what is the county doing specifically to address these families, especially country homes that are affected by fallowed lands, aerial sprayings, a lot of agriculture that's happening with increased industry coming in as well? There's going to be a lot more traffic, especially on unpaved roads. So is there any outreach or specific education that the county is doing to address these issues?
Yeah, there's a few outreach and awareness programs that the county is doing. For instance, there's a good neighbor policy that we enforce as well to all the agricultural, to the farmers. There's also, as mentioning, a report that they have to submit to see how they're going to address when they're doing burning, when they're doing fallowing, when they're doing any type of work on their land as well. So there are rules and regulations that they have to follow. It's not that they just go and do and plow and whenever they need. No, they have to follow a process. They do have to follow the permits, and they do have to follow the requirements under that report.
Jeff, anything to add from environmental health side of things?
Not necessarily environmental health, but from the public health perspective, yes, we are looking at studies that are currently being done. They're looking at past studies to kind of look at baselines and see what treatments or what, not treatments, but what the studies are reflecting. What are we seeing? Obviously, meeting with our care providers, getting an understanding of what type of patients, what are they experiencing. So we continue to look out, to reach out to the medical community and the community as a whole to see where the issues are and where can we be of best use to try to assist them in that process.
Thank you. Any additional questions? We have one over here.
I have a question in the back. This is for Paula and Jeff. As far as reuse of water in the valley, have you been studying either the groundwater or reuse from the city water? I know some of the proposals in other districts, say the Western Municipal in LA, they're reusing a lot more wastewater, and is that something that's feasible here? And then secondarily, the water quality in the drains, has there been a really concerted effort to look at that? And then lastly, it's a question for Paula with the TMDL program, trying to understand how that's being implemented going forward and looking at as far as calculating the nitrogen content and things like that. If we're not using the groundwater, is that as big of an impact in our area as opposed to other areas, say Coachella, where they do use the groundwater?
It's about 10 questions there, but I'll do my best. For reuse, it's really the entity that uses the water. They can determine if they want to reuse it, and we would basically look at the water that they're reusing and make sure that it meets the standards. But as we see the drought coming, I would anticipate that there would be more push for reuse by all of the consumers of the water. I mean, that's going to be a good source of water going forward. Regarding the groundwater, in the Imperial Valley, we are asking the dischargers to start monitoring the groundwater, because what we found is that there is not a lot of data about the groundwater. There's basically an understanding that there is a problem with the groundwater, but there's not a lot of data. So as we go forward, we're asking that people monitor when they discharge to the groundwater, and we can determine if there are impacts from their discharges, and also get a better sense of what that quality of groundwater is. You know, the state does have a requirement for sustainable groundwater management, and the local agencies that consume groundwater do need to get together and look at groundwater use and make sure that it is sustainable. I think I've answered most of your questions.
Thank you. As far as county environmental health, your question with regards to reuse, in fact, we've had this discussion, it was just last week, and we have made some concessions. We've looked at what's happening in Riverside and San Diego with the subsurface use, or I guess injection of certain types of gray water. And so there is a process in place, and we're working with the planning department to allow these activities as applicants, or if we see requests from various property owners, primarily in the unincorporated area, to utilize their gray water, primarily wash water, for irrigation purposes, subsurface irrigation. So those are some things that we're definitely open to. From a municipality perspective, I mean, that would be something that they would, again, look to the user there. They would reach out to the regional board for approval for the utilization of that. Again, it'd be subsurface. The key, I think it's very important that they look at the water quality as part of that discharge. So there may be some pre-treatment prior to, because we do want to make sure that we're still protecting our groundwater source. Because as the drought continues to move forward, I mean, we're going to become more reliant on groundwater in some perspective, and we want to ensure that water quality remains as clean as possible.
There's one back there, and then there's one up here.
Good morning. With the anticipated reduction in water, would basically mean less water circulating back into the Salton Sea. And I'm wondering if that would increase the level of toxicity of the chemicals coming through and through New River. So if that's a concern, what would be the strategy to address that?
I think the New River, there was initially a strategic plan, and I think that we need to go back and take a look at that. And there is the first phase of the improvement project, which is dealing with the flows through the city of Calexico. But beyond that, strategies need to be looked at in terms of the water flows in the New River and how that they can be improved. I think that's going to take a regional approach in terms of are there maybe, I know the county's looking at possibly a treatment plant or other methods to treat the flows, but the flows from Mexico are really not something that we can stop, and they do have contaminants in there which are above the standards that we really would like to see. So it is a concern.
And just to add to that, so there's quite a bit of data out there that's been done, that's been collected with regards to water quality, primarily off the New River, but also off the Alamo. Even the cities, even the sampling that we're doing now, we're not seeing, the semi-volatile organics or the SOCs, the chemical aspects, the contaminants in that regard. But more so we're seeing bacteria levels and elevated depending on what's being released on from Mexico. If they have, one of their plants go down, there's a significant bypass, and we'll see a very significant increase of bacteria loads that is being discharged into New River. So it's primarily a bacteria issue that we're seeing now, and the data also reflects that historically, where we see the chemical issues or the toxins that you're pointing to more in the sediments from over long-term discharges, and that's where they talked about the missive soil study that I think is important to look at. As those shorelines begin to recede and more soils are exposed, what's in that soil and the potential for those soils to become airborne. And if so, how far do those products, those toxins, if you will, travel? Are we talking about a short distance, or are they making their way into the communities or past the communities? So, again, I'm not seeing it in the water quality today. Again, we have a city that we started we started doing collecting or doing monitoring in 2019. We plan on doing this through 2026. And again, we've initially we're looking at bacteria. We have 2 sample sites. We have one right at the border. We have one that's past the last discharge from City of Brawley, off the Vale Road. So the 2 trying to capture, the discharges coming from the primary wastewater treatment facility to see if we see a variation in the chemicals that are being discharged, or I guess they're as part of their NPDES permits and what they're discharging, that we're picking up anything different. Right now, we're not seeing anything other than, again, bacteria is a big key, and more so at the border than we are downstream. But again, my focus, my thoughts are, and it's just my thoughts, is to look at the soils more so, or the sediments as they become exposed.
But as you see, if there's less water circulating, would there be higher concentrations of bacteria and toxins? Because there's less water to dilute it.
So in the flows themselves, not necessarily, because you have your discharge. If you're talking about, basically the Salton Sea is kind of
solids.
Yeah. So you would see concentrations in the Salton Sea, and that's why we're seeing the HABs. We're seeing, initially they were seasonal. Around the country they're seasonal, but as our warmer weathers and the makeup, the chemical makeup, the nutrient makeup of the Salton Sea, we're seeing HABs, harmful algal blooms year round. Some significant, some not so. But nonetheless, we're seeing more and more. So it's more of the concentrations within the sea itself than necessarily coming through the river itself, from my perspective.
My name is Rod Williams. I guess, we've had a great opportunity here. Supervisor Plancarte, I'm glad that you had this vision to have this meeting today. I appreciate that. But we really haven't heard anything that's a solution. We've talked about the problems. Mr. Vesey and Mr. Grizzle gave you a little bit of insight as far as what they've all been doing to try to save water, and there's been a very large buy-in in the county for irrigation sprinkler pipe. But the root of the fundamentals of the problem, there's only a couple of ways to solve this problem. Number one is, as good a system as we have, as efficient as the system that we have for IID, they've known for years and years that they have terrific percolation in a lot of there's 3,300 feet or miles of canals. There's a terrific amount of evaporation. Every time we build an inline reservoir, there's more evaporation. The solution is to put a pressurized pipe system together with one major reservoir that would lend itself to recreational opportunities and for constructive use here in the valley. We did studies on this 10 years ago. I personally paid and brought in people from Nebraska, from Valmont Industries. They spent 3 days. We put all the information together. They came back down, made a presentation to management at the IID at that time, showed them without any cost to the IID that they were losing at least 600,000 acre-feet of water per year in percolation and evaporation. Plus, on the law of the river, they have a half mile on each side of the canals that they have the right to reclaim the percolation that's been there for hundreds of years. And you know, anyone that wants to take a look, go out to the roadside park as you go to Yuma, just before you get to the roadside park there in the sandhills, in the dunes. There's a big water well right along the All-American Canal. There's also another one close by on south of the canal. Those are credited to pump 10,000 acre-feet a year back into the All-American on a treaty trade that the federal government did with an Indian reservation. So you're already transporting water from Yuma County, or from Imperial County, to the benefit of other people outside of Imperial County. But primarily what I want to talk about, you know, those are problems that IID has to face, and how they could, you know, this is a national emergency. Anytime we look at the national news and they've had 3 or 4 days of testimony at the federal level on the Colorado River Basin, it's a national emergency. And if we listen closely to the first 2 gentlemen that spoke this morning, you know, it doesn't matter what we do. They're going to cut the amount of water that we're able to have. They have to get water back in the reservoir. And so they're letting us do our best to come up with a plan. So it's my recommendation to the county, everyone needs to get familiar with the Lawrence Livermore report that was released in January of 2008. Read it. It's 150-some pages. Lance spoke about it this morning. It makes a very bold statement. It's categorized that the Salton Sea aquifer is the underground aquifer reaching from the Salton Sea to about 30 miles southeast of San Luis, Mexico. And as I've farmed Mr. Brock's farm and helped to redevelop some of the wells out there on the East Mesa, he and I both know we have pump studies. There's considerable information that has been done. The government has a cadre of wells out there that they've been monitoring, because we used to pull their trucks out when they got stopped, because you know, that's the way we do. But the water is very good. It's very good quality. It would go right into the All-American Canal with very, very minor treatment at best, maybe a filter, because it's about 850 TDS, IID 750 to 780. So we have a vast quantity of water that we're setting on. Lawrence Livermore report says it's the largest untapped groundwater aquifer in the continental United States. We need to have a streamlined process with the county. The county needs to be the leader, because IID only controls the water down to the tile line. Everything below that is your responsibility. And so we people that are here to help promote development of groundwater, even though it's a lot more expensive, you know, we need water. The county needs water. We all need water. And so, you know, Colorado River Basin Regional Water Control Board is going to have to get on board, because this is a national emergency. We can't wait 3 years. We can't go to the IID like I did in 2013 and try to help them with the playa. You know, I've got 4,000 ton of wood chips stacked that I was going to help to give it to them to run a test out on the playa to stop the dust. So all of these things, you know, they kind of get built up, but we're here to solve a problem that's a national emergency. And the Imperial County supervisors have the golden key. You need to have a separate department that heads up groundwater development. And you need to streamline the permitting, and you need to have drilling rigs in here as fast as you can get them in to do all the tests that are possible. I've already done my own up by Nyland. When I farmed up there, I know what that is. I know what Mr. Brock's is on the East Mesa. We could produce, if you wanted if it was an emergency, he has the ability on a section of land to produce at least 20,000 acre feet and could be 50,000 acre feet. So the solutions are there. This has been a great opportunity for us to all gather and find out the problems, but we need solutions. And you have the key. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions, comments? Okay. Often when I participate in these, I'll walk away saying or thinking, God, I wish I had an opportunity to add this. So here's an opportunity if there's any of you that thought of something that either we did not ask or we should have asked, or you thought about and want to add, this is the opportunity. I invite you to do so.
One observation is that recently at the state board, they have a lot of infrastructure funds that are available to look at both water supply and water quality issues. So that might be something that in response to his point that you could be looking at. I don't know if it would be for that type of facility for piping, but it's certainly worth reaching out, and if you need a contact, I can get you that.
Thank you.
Just one tiny point about this last gentleman's comment. There's been some studies that have been done in India regarding mitigation of evaporation of canal water, specifically placing solar panels over it. So I think that right now is the time for out-of-the-box thinking, and as the politicians say, never let a crisis go to waste. So this is our moment now. Yes.
Thank you.
And just to kind of jump in on that, I definitely support the approach there. I agree with the approach with regards to utilization of groundwater. Definitely banking water in aquifers is, I think, a very smart way to go. I think the key is understanding ownership of groundwater. So making sure that's something that is we get out in front of from a county perspective to ensure that we do have access, because when the water wars, as they begin to build up, and it's going to intensify, and so ensuring we've locked that in, we clearly understand where our rights are with regards to access to groundwater. I think that's one of the key things we need to focus on as well.
And I'll go back to the questions that were asked in the beginning and how the non-attainment status here in the Valley is. One of the biggest things that we're doing is also working binationally with Semarnat, with Secretaría de Protección al Ambiente, and working with the local municipality, which is the city of Mexicali, in order for us to work together, work in conjunction in order to have projects, in order to have some type of mitigation. They were talking about pollution, how it travels. A lot in November, December, when they have all those traditions about burning wood or burning fireworks, and it's a hard thing in order for us to overcome. For a lot of us from here from the U.S. go to Mexicali and do these things that we cannot do in the U.S., right? And there's a campaign going, Ambientalízate. We've had it for 14 years, where it focuses on media campaigns in order for us to provide awareness and provide research in order for them not them, but everybody at the border not to burn. So, I mean, there's a lot of national efforts also going on, because a lot of that transport of emissions do travel not only to Calexico, but all the way to Centro and Brawley. So I just wanted to focus that it's not only in the U.S. that we're doing these efforts, it's also binationally.
Okay, well, thank you very much. You have helped us get informed on some areas that, as well as the questions that came up from the public, that will require some homework, at least for me, on ways that we can work through this issue. Thank you very much. For you, our next panel convenes at 11:15. Is that correct? All right. Sounds like the yes behind me. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And those they represent are currently facing, and how it is that we plan to address those challenges. With that said, I would like to welcome our moderator for this panel, That would be Chairman of the Imperial County Board of Supervisors, Jesus Escobar.
Good morning again. Welcome. Let's see here. Let me get organized here. Mr. Tomas, and I apologize if I mispronounced the name, Tomas Tortes Jr.?
Yes, thank you.
Welcome. Mr. Patrick O'Dowd, welcome. I'm going to read a little excerpt here. The Salton Sea is a cultural resource for the Torres Martinez tribe. Despite all restoration and management efforts to date, the sea's problems aren't getting better. In fact, I think we all agree they're getting worse, and they will get worse in the near future. Some aptly argue that restoring the sea to its former fame and glory of the 60s is not realistic. The reality is that there is not enough water runoff going into the sea to restore even previous water levels. This also makes the implementation of the state Salton Sea management program very challenging. Legal obligations under the QSA to address certain environmental impacts resulting from water transfers and quantification of Colorado River water have yet to fully materialize. Obviously, we're talking about less water for farming, which also means less water for the sea, which means less farming, which means less jobs. To discuss these concerns, we're very fortunate to have both of you here with us, and we'll go straight to the questions. Mr. Tortes, some of the general challenges that Native American tribes in the western U.S. are facing with these water shortages, and obviously we have tribes all across our footprint in the very near vicinity. We're talking about not just Imperial County, San Diego County, that borders us to the west, Riverside County to the north, Yuma County to the east, and obviously multiple tribes in the very near vicinity within the municipality of Mexicali as well. What are some of the challenges that you see specifically tribe-related that we may not be seeing in the overall picture of our current drought?
Good morning. Thank you for the question. In our language, we say meowin as far as greetings. And thank you for the question. And you're absolutely right when you're talking about water shortages and the people that live, I would say the people that live in this area for, thousands and thousands of years. It's not, now we call them tribes, but we were all one people that lived here without borders and counties and cities and, even the United States border. So when I look at the question of the people that deal with water shortages, we've always dealt with water shortages throughout our generations of lifetime. And we lived one with the environment and moved where there was water or dug wells to where we knew there water was. That's how we as a people, we call ourselves the Kawia, which means, it's translated to masters of the environment, because we were able to live no matter where we were forced to go. So once we were forced to live in the middle of the desert, it was just another avenue that we migrated to, just like many people did back in the day. So water shortages come and go, and we know that. When we were forced to live on the land that we are now, the water shortages continue. And we advocate now for inclusion for the policies that the government makes. Now, we've never been included. I know you talked about the QSA. We were never included as far as tribes in the QSA. We were never included in any water policy, this far from the Colorado River, even though we were part of that environment. We knew the Colorado River came and went for hundreds of years in this area, and we've adapted to that. So the answer to your question about how it affects the tribes in the area, the water shortages now, we're part of the community, so it drastically affects our communities now. Being and given that our tribes at this day, as I've said in other meetings in the public, is that our tribe doesn't have access to clean drinking water. We have that environmental injustice now, and we seek environmental equity to have clean drinking water. And I've said at the last Salton Sea Authority meeting that everyone that was against our project, we were trying to get a project to bring water in from the desert, and there were at least 85 commenters opposing our project. And my challenge was to them then, how would they provide my people clean drinking water? Because every single commenter on that panel or on that meeting went home, showered with clean drinking water, drank clean drinking water, cooked with clean drinking water, and my grandparents and my children and my cousins and every infant on my reservation does not have clean drinking water. So again, to exasperate that, what the shortage of water on the Colorado River now and the policies that are coming down to say they're going to take more water from not just the community but the reservation is exponentially drastic to our people. And when I say our people, again, I mean the community, because we don't see ourselves as, just a place with drawn borders like the government has made. We have a reservation that's checkerboarded, so there are people within the community that are our neighbors, so we advocate for all. Recently, you may have heard that the EPA has indicted us for delivering contaminated water to residents that live on the reservation because our water is contaminated with arsenic. Well, when I'm asked by the press or the EPA, I tell them then you should educate everyone that there's arsenic in the aquifer where our reservation is, because we all sit on an aquifer, we dig wells, we bring up that water, and I tell the EPA, then why aren't you informing the farmers who have 1 to 2 households that lived here for hundreds of years? They're drinking and bathing and cooking with the same contaminated arsenic water, and no one is educating them on that. So education, I think, is key on water and water shortages and water quality. Those are things that we all need to look at. As far as infrastructure, again, we're one of the underserved communities in Coachella Valley and Imperial County. Infrastructure, again, just increases the health and human factor of the shortage of water. I've seen on the internet and on the news, on TV, how you're supposed to take 30 seconds of time to wash your hands to help mitigate and get rid of the COVID virus. But how are you to do that when you don't have clean drinking water? Are you to wash your hands with contaminated water or even water at that? So if there's less water, how are we to protect ourselves? So I know now with the congressional hearing that they had last month that they're demanding more water to be taken from Imperial County. Torres Martinez is strictly advocating to stop that, because how are we to protect ourselves when there's a pandemic here and it's just one pandemic after another? And as a note on that, this is not the first pandemic that we've had. We've had 100 years ago the pandemic of the smallpox, which killed tens of thousands of our people because we were not immune to it. So it's not the first pandemic. But back to the point, the shortage of water, one of our resolutions and one of our conditions that we propose, that we're going to propose as Torres Martinez is, again, like I said, we know that there's water available in the desert. We're talking about taking the top of the aquifer and bringing that water to the Coachella Valley. Another proposal that we advocate is for that sea to sea, bringing water in from the sea. We know that's an answer, but that's 10 years out. Well, guess what? 10 years is the amount of time I believe that we have, and I've heard recently that the Salton Sea, as it recedes, and everyone knows that dust that gets in the air affects us all. 10 years is the time that we have that it's drastically going to shrink and get more of that contaminated dust in the air. So if we jump on one of those projects to bring the water from the sea to the Salton Sea, I think that's just in time to start saving our people from that contaminated dust that gets in the air. So those are, the resolutions that we have as far as the tribe to try to mitigate There's also the aquifer that we sit on. We know that there's a legal battle that's pending because, again, the tribes have to fight for every single drop of water that we have, just like any community. The aquifer that sits under us also sits under the valley, so we have to fight for, the quantitative value of water that, we should get as a priority. There are several tribes on the Colorado River that have a priority and they have water. But as you get further, the Quechan tribe, Torres Martinez tribe, we, again, like I said, we're not included in those. We should have been just like the regular community that live out here. But again, those are our concerns, and then those are some of our resolutions that have to do with the water shortage.
You brought a couple good points, and I want to maybe dive into those 2 points that you made. Well, one point's obvious, that's why we're here, and that's our drought and the lack of potential water for our area. A couple of that is the quality of water that you talked about. So when you do less water that is contaminated, it's not two negatives does not make a positive. My question to you to further the conversation along is, there are multiple tribal nations within our general vicinity, not just within Imperial County, but again, I'll repeat myself, San Diego County, Riverside County, Yuma County, and our brothers to the south, and the municipality of Mexicali, San Luis Rio Colorado, et cetera, et cetera. Have you as a collective entity united together to form a stronger coalition to advocate for not just water rights, but water quality, especially given the potential limitations that we're all going to be facing?
Yes, thank you for that question. We've had 2 roundtables already within the last couple months, including the tribes of the local area. And yes, we're going to be reaching out to those that are across the border because we're all affected, as you say. But we have started collaborating, and because we know that fight is coming, and we started, planning out the structure and the schedule of how we're going to advocate for the water.
And as a county representative, love to work with you on that specifically, and form a collective bond and a collective group to obviously further the cause.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Mr. O'Dowd, Salton Sea's not looking too good, unfortunately. What are some of the plans, ideas, brainstorming of the issue of less water coming to our Salton Sea? And we just talked about, obviously, environmental risks involved, health risks involved, et cetera, but more from a planning stage and what we can do to mitigate the potential loss of water to our Salton Sea. What are some of the ideas that are being talked about at the Salton Sea Authority?
Well, first, I'd like to say it's very difficult following Chairman Torres and his compelling story of how his people have been affected for the thousands of years that preceded our involvement in the community. But the Salton Sea has been changing for a long time. They've known about the challenges that the sea is experiencing now, at least as early as the 40s and probably before that. There have been projects proposed in the 70s. The QSA had work associated with it, contemplated to address some of the challenges. But a lot gets talked about and very little has gotten done. Part of the challenge is that it is an evolving ecosystem. And what we do with it on a sustainable basis has to be just that. We have to have the resources in place, both hydrologically, financially, and otherwise, so that what we implement remains the same over time. The seawater importation project that Chairman Torres talked about is a very highly sought after endeavor. It's also going to be a very expensive project, and it's going to be very difficult to implement if it can get done. But it doesn't address the challenges in the immediate. Right now, the state's already behind in implementing their required projects from the QSA transfer, which was a 2003 agreement, and they're playing catch up now, but they're still behind. And with this impending proposed conservation reduction of flows to the sea in the region, that's only going to exacerbate the problem. So what we're doing is the Salton Sea Authority. The Salton Sea Authority, most of you, the Salton Sea Authority has been around for 30 years, so most of you, I suspect, have at least heard of it. But what the authority is a joint powers agency formed by Imperial County and Riverside County, IID and CVWD in 1993, and in 2003 the Torres Martinez tribe joined the authority. The leadership of the authority is 2 elected officials, each from each of those agencies. So my board, my bosses, my 10 bosses, represent every man, woman, and child at and around the sea. And the challenge that we have at the authority, well, it's not really a challenge, it's the opportunity that we have at the authority, is within each one of those 5-member agencies, they bring their particular and discrete concerns. Like here today, we're dealing with issues in Imperial County, which some are the same and some are different than the challenges in Riverside County or on the tribal reservation. You know, we always look at this imaginary line between Imperial and Riverside County, but I kind of look at the sea more as a circle, because the challenge that we deal with are not affected by that one line. So what we're doing at the authority is working together to identify these, like today, challenges will percolate up, opportunities will be identified here, as well as with our tribal partners and in Riverside County, that will help, in Riverside County, that will help inform the decision makers who are making some really tough decisions on the Colorado River as to what their choices will do to our communities. And beyond that, how do we assess the impacts of those choices? That to me is really where we're focusing our energy. We're not at the table. We don't really know what those negotiations look like. We don't know whether it's a gallon of water or 10 million acre feet of water. But at the end of the day, they're going to make a decision that says in order to stabilize the Colorado River, they're going to collectively agree on this amount of water that's going to be conserved. Well, is that water going to be conserved through on-farm conservation or through fallowing? And what's the effect of that to the sea? What's the effect of that to the community? A lot of what you talked about today. And then who pays for that? So we are working with the counties, with the water agencies, with our state and federal partners to try and make sure that when these things do come to pass, that the community of tomorrow is better than the community of today. And it's a tremendous undertaking, because the scope and scale of what's being proposed is potentially on the order of what we've experienced from the QSA. And the state has had 2 decades to deal with that challenge, and this could be something that has to be dealt with literally overnight. So it's a daunting task. But collectively working together, which I think is really important, right? I think we need to recognize that every individual, every special community-based organization, I know one particularly significant one is sponsoring this event today, has their own individual concerns. We need to aggregate those concerns, balance them in the whole, and collectively understand and advocate for solutions that help us get to a yes, so that we can participate in the successful stabilization of the Colorado River.
Thank you. As elected officials, or having elected officials as bosses, and Miguel, where's Miguel? He's complaining about having 5 bosses. You got 10, so he's got an easy job here at the county. But it's very important, and I'm going to take 2 comments from the previous session, one from Gary Redfern, our star reporter from the Ivy Press, and the other one from the young lady that is no longer here. I think she was around that area for Comité Cívico del Valle. And water shortages are coming. It's not a matter of if, it's when and what amount. So we have to be realistic that they will happen. The issue here as elected officials, especially at the local level, be it city, county, etc., is the advocacy efforts that we as a collective group share to not just inform, but invest in our collective communities, especially the low to moderate income disadvantaged communities that will suffer the most, because that's the nature of the beast. The lower you are on the totem pole, the more you will suffer financially, health-wise, etc. So our job as collective individuals representing our areas where we got elected from or representing a specific CBO, nonprofit, advocacy group, we need to really fight for those dollars from a federal perspective to make sure that we are helping out the individuals that are in most needs in multiple fronts, not just communication or miscommunication, which happens quite a bit, but also investing in our communities from a health perspective. Because again, we have to realize the fact that this is coming, but we need to band together to support the cause. If you could just take a couple minutes, and I'll leave that open-ended, who wants to go first on my comments.
So I'll jump in first and say that prior to serving as the executive director of the Salton Sea Authority, I was actually a board member of the Coachella Valley Water District and served on the Salton Sea Authority board for the previous 6 years. So I appreciate what you're saying. I think that public service is the highest calling, and your duty to the people who elected you is a heavy burden to carry. I hear what you're saying, and I think that it always redounds to fighting for the dollars. And so what I'm trying to do is to change the narrative maybe by 2 degrees and say, we're fighting for the solutions to the problems. And you can put dollars associated to that, but it's more than just dollars, right? It's going to be a full spectrum of solutions that are going to address this, because it's going to take a lot of time. And part of that is going to be dealing with the interface between your jurisdiction and the next jurisdiction. And some of that is going to be overlap, and some of it's going to be complementary. And working together, you can leverage those dollars that you need for this particular project to create a more substantial opportunity that gets a bigger bang for the buck. So at the end of the day, this is going to be a very expensive proposition. So I'm with you 100% that we need to get the resources we need from the state and federal government to implement the solutions that are going to make this a better community tomorrow than it is today. To me, that there's no other alternative. We cannot accept a lesser alternative as a result of these actions being taken. We have to look to a brighter future. I mean, that's our jobs as, well, that's my job for my kids and grandkids. So.
Thank you for looking at the resolutions, and we know the water shortage is coming, like you said. And as far as Torres Martinez, we know that, again, like I said, water shortage has always been a problem. And you know, when we're talking about transporting water, it has always been done. Look at the mountains that we dug pipelines, we dug tunnels through mountains before up north in Riverside County. We dug tunnels through miles and miles of mountains to bring the luxury of water to urban areas. And to them, it's a luxury. But to us here in the desert, it's a necessity for our survival, like I said before. So it can be done. We believe that it can be done. When there's a hurricane that devastates the Midwest or New Orleans, the president or the Congress enacts and puts billions of dollars into, you know, investing and rebuilding. Well, now is the time that we are calling for the federal government to be proactive. We know this is happening. Put money into this system that is happening now before, you know, the cost of, we know there's economic devastation, there's environmental devastation that will happen. But as we see it, you know, what is that final cost is how many human lives must be lost before, you know, the federal government does something. We always look back, we always say hindsight, but, you know, we, through history, know that this is going to happen. And prior, you know, when in the cowboy days, when people ran out of water, they simply moved, but that's not an option. So the option is for the federal government and the state and the county to work together to put money together to take care of this issue and protect us all, I believe.
Thank you for your comments. I like to use the word resiliency when it comes to describing Imperial County, and I'll give you 3 examples of resiliency and working together as a collective group. Example number 1 is we turned, or our forefathers, because it definitely wasn't me, our forefathers turned this arid desert hot, dry land into 550 acres of farmland, 550,000 acres of farmland. Example 2, and this is in my lifetime. I'm going to smile at Mike because we fought hard for this and all the other supervisors as well, and that's COVID-19. As a low to moderate income community with a lot of disadvantaged areas, if not a collective disadvantaged area, which is the Imperial County, we are getting smidgens when it comes to vaccines. I mean, I saw the reports, 100, 200. Equity, non-existent. Fair treatment, not in the vocabulary. And we fought hard to get vaccines to our valley. Lithium. My lifetime, I'm proud of Imperial County when we banded together and worked as a collective group. CBOs, nonprofits, chambers of commerce, elected officials from all levels to make Lithium Valley come true for Imperial County. We're just it's just in its infancy stage, but never have I seen us all come together as one to literally kick butt and make our community better and make our community have a much better future. And I think that's what we need to do now, is band together to make sure that electeds, nonprofits, CBOs, chambers of commerce, farmers, business, everybody's working together as one so that we can collect. Again, this is coming, but how can we mitigate the issues at hand for everyone? Businessmen, businesswomen, farm workers, low to moderate income individuals, the unemployed, the underserved, etc., where everybody gets fair treatment. I think that's the important thing of banding together, and that's really the importance of this summit today, is making sure that we are, one, fully engaged, and two, as informed as possible as we continue to make these decisions down the road. With that, I'm not sure if we have any questions or comments from the public. Everybody's getting ready to go to lunch. Oh, Mike's coming up. Look out for Mike. He needs a mic.
I have a comment. When I think about the Salton Sea, I absolutely become disgusted. 20 years. And I've been to Dianne Feinstein's office, the ex-Senator Baxter, the new Kamala Harris, Congressman Ruiz, Congressman Vargas, the Governor of the United States, Salton Sea Task Force. I've been to so many damn meetings, it almost makes you sick. And it's been 20 years, nothing's happened to it. You know, this gentleman over here brought up the aquifer issue. Why isn't that being involved in the restoration of the Salton Sea? I mean, it is really disgusting. If the Salton Sea issue was in the Sacramento, San Francisco basin, it would have been taken care of. LA, San Diego basin, it would have been taken care of. If the winds blew from the east to the west, it would have been taken care of. But we're stuck here, isolated, with this destruction of the Salton Sea. And the federal government and the state of California has really, in my estimation, done nothing to assist the residents of Imperial County. It's disgusting. I mean, the biggest dynamic fishery in the continental United States, the Pacific Flyway for all the beautiful birds to come and sit, gorgeous place, dwindling down to a cesspool of trash. And what can be done to benefit Imperial County and its residents to deal with the receding, dangerous Salton Sea and the beauty that once skyrocketed that area? I mean, if you were from somewhere else and you drove by the Salton Sea, you would think, I made a wrong turn. That's got to be the Sea of Cortez. That's how gorgeous it is. Nobody's done nothing. It sits there and boils and bleeds each and every day and continues to recede, and nothing positively has been done. The underground aquifer, that sounds like a solution to me, but who's going to take the first step to make that happen? So, my soapbox has just knocked me off. Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly, for those eloquent comments. I'm not sure if you have any Comments back to Supervisor Kelly.
So I'm not as young as I used to be, but I'm not as old as I hope to be. And when I had the opportunity to take this job, I didn't take this job to do nothing. And I think that COVID has made things difficult for all of us to get done. But I have to tell you that I think a lot of things are happening. I don't know what the future of the sea looks like. I think that the likelihood is, at a minimum, there are going to be a portfolio, a mosaic, if you will, of projects that will address the risks to human health and safety, that will restore habitat to the best of our ability, that will ensure that the communities at and around the sea are safe, quality places to live. We've been working both in Sacramento and in D.C. in securing legislation, securing opportunities through the Watershed Act, through the WRDA legislation. We have a Corps of Engineers feasibility study approved, which we expect to get finalized hopefully by the end of September, which will begin a process. It's called a feasibility study, but what it really is an underwriting. It's an underwriting of a project. The state's developing their long-term plan, and that feasibility study will take that long-term plan and compare it to all other options for addressing the long-term sustainability of the sea and region, and including seawater importation, including groundwater analysis, and come up with a project. It's a 3-year, $3 million study, but the federal government understands the scope and scale of what needs to happen here. So we expect it's probably going to take a little longer, and it's probably going to cost a little more money, but it is an active public process. The Salton Sea Authority is a joint local sponsor with the state of California in conjunction with the federal government in the development and in the implementation of that plan. And I believe that once it's done, we will have a project approved by the United States Army Corps of Engineers that will be eligible for 65% federal match. And that project almost certainly will be in the billions of dollars. So that's a good starting point. But that's tomorrow, right? The seawater importation is probably next week. The core study's tomorrow. What we need to deal with is the right now. And what we're dealing with right now is, what do we not know about the proposed transfers that are taking place? What do we not know? I mean, there's a few people at the table. Personally, as a former director of CVWD, I think it's probably a good thing that there's not 10,000 people trying to figure that out. It's very complicated. But we're going to know. We're going to know what the transfer amounts are going to be at the end of the day. And then we're going to receive information as to what the proposed anticipated impacts of those transfers are going to be. I think it will be critical for us to validate those assumptions. When they say these are the impacts, we need to be able to nod in the affirmative or say, I don't get it. We need to get comfortable that whatever those impacts are, we know what they are, we know how they're going to be mitigated, and we know who's going to pay for them. And that is what the authority is working on most diligently right now.
Thank you for that, Mr. Kelly. And I know 20 years is a long time, but when you think about when the Salton Sea was formed, not by any one of us here, 117 years ago, like I said earlier, our tribe's villages were flooded, and it took 100 years for us to realize that, and we sued the United States government in that instance and said, you know, what is your compensation for this land that you gave us, and then it's flooded, not by us, and we sued the United States government, we sued IID, we sued CVWD, and we won. We got land back in viable land to be transferred for that land that was flooded, not by our fault. But when you're looking at 100 years for the government to do something, we had to act like that lawsuit and get a settlement from the United States government and IAD and CVWD. So 20 years, yes, now we're looking at drastic times and the calls for drastic measures. Again, I advocate for everyone here to contact your congressmen and your assemblymen, and it can be done. I've worked together now after that lawsuit was enacted in the Congressional Act of the Torres-Martinez. Every one of you can look up the Torres-Martinez Settlement Act, which we sued the government and won. But since then, we've worked with IID and CVWD, Imperial County, Riverside County, and we've gotten certain amounts of money to help mitigate for the sea. But again, it takes more than that. Like I said, with our project, George Martinez is going to transfer 5,000 acre-feet of water into the sea very soon. I know it's a drop in the bucket, but it's some resolution. We're also looking at, in answer to your question, about tapping into the aquifer and transferring after we use it and transferring that water through, water treatment and then into the sea. But those are only small things that we can do as a tribe. But when we work together with the Salton Sea Authority members, I think when we go back to D.C. and advocate for more money and talk about the human lives that are at risk, I think, again, to answer your question, that's the immediate answer, is to get them to be aware. And one of the two aspects, I think, is, I've asked Governor Newsom personally, I shook his hand and looked him in the eye and said, you need to come down to the Salton Sea and walk on the shore yourself, and you'll see what we're looking at. And I think a lot of the legislators, I've been to the Capitol in Sacramento and the Capitol in Washington, D.C., a lot of people do not even understand what's going on over here because they haven't been here. But once you come here and you walk on the shore and you see, I think that's key to what's here. And like I said, in January, I went to the testimony with Congressman Ruiz and the Salton Sea Authority to advocate for the Salton Sea and to get more money for the Salton Sea. We were knocked down by comments like Representative Tom McClintock, and you can look up his statement, and he said, let the sea dry up. So we need to oppose people like that are sitting in Congress that have no idea of what they're saying. He's saying, our lives don't matter, but our lives do. So when we advocate, we ask for your support. Again, contact, your congressman, your assemblyman. Your county is sitting here today. Salton Sea Authority is here today. George Martinez is here today. I have my cards if you want my cards for contact and work with us to help resolve and get water back into the sea. Thank you.
And if I could briefly, Supervisor Kelly, I appreciate your frustration. I understand your concerns. I've lived in the Coachella Valley for 25 years, which I recognize makes me a relative neophyte. But I have seen the sea decline over that period of time. But I know also that Supervisor Plancarte, who is now the Salton Sea Authority president, hears you also, and I think that I look forward to working together with him and the rest of my board members to make things happen.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from our audience? Mr. Williams. We'll be here through dinner then.
Likewise, my first trip to Imperial Valley was in 1972, and my soon-to-be partner at that time, that's now deceased, had a boat on the Salton Sea, and we went up and went fishing. And, so I watched the sea decline over the years. And according to my calculations, and I used to own a water drilling rig, and I've drilled a lot of water wells in the Midwest. 155 groundwater wells at 4,000 GPM, which they're capable of doing here. It'll take 13 drilling rigs 1 year, and you'll put 1 million acre-feet of water in the Salton Sea at less than 3,000 TDS. Your current volume of TDS is over 55,000, 1.5 times what salt water in the sea is. It'll take you 10 years at 1 million acre-feet, and you'll be out there boating and have the best lake in Southern California. Now, you guys have had 20 years to work on this, and I haven't even gone to college, and I can fix it in a damn year. Okay? That's all I got to say.
No comments, questions, concerns? No tomato throwing. With that, please join me in a round of applause to Mr. Tomas Tortes, Jr. and Mr. Patrick O'Dowd. Miguel, the floor is yours.
At this time, I'd like to call up Supervisor Blancarte for the closing remarks of our summit.
First, I'd like to maybe summarize a few takeaways that definitely we'll be looking into. We know that negotiations continue to take place. We are fairly confident that it will be consensus-based, but always need to know more of what's on the table. But by mid-August, we should know what information is there. Funding is going to play a key role on any conservation efforts going forward. Investment will be needed, especially investment in more efficient but yet costly agricultural practices. We will likely see new crops that adjust to less water. And that'll be perhaps one of the ways to address challenges going forward. We are very concerned about rental increases and people moving away, and of course those areas drawing our water. We also understand that groundwater is very important and definitely has a role to look, and we need to dedicate more time and learning to this effort. Communication and coordination are going to be key to moving forward. In ensuring that all needs are met and addressed, that the impacts are mitigated as much as possible. We get into this conversation of mitigation or restoration, and it's been a long time since I've heard the word restoration used with the Salton Sea. Mitigating is a term that I don't like. I will commit together with our board to finding ways to work on ways of restoring this. We know that the county can help with streamlining permitting processes and looking at reservoirs. And all these are things that we will be looking into to see where they fall in the array of solutions. Last but not least, I'd like to thank my fellow supervisors for immediately buying in when I pitched the idea of having this gathering. I really had a bunch of notes as to things that I was going to recommend and suggest to convince them to do something like this, and they did it like that. For that, I'm very thankful to all of them. To all the panelists that were here with us today, for traveling, taking time out of your schedules. ICOE for hosting us. What a great facility, huh? This is, you look outside. You look outside and it looks like it's 80 degrees outside or 75 degrees. Just that 50. Just that 50, yeah. I also want to thank county staff for putting this together quickly on a marathon. Talking about pulling 16-hour days for everybody involved. People had vacations ready to go, and then we come up with this idea that we want to do this, and okay, thank you. They rose to the occasion. I want to thank all of you for attending and sharing, and I ask you that you continue to share this information and that we continue to communicate. A little bit of housekeeping. The video that is being taken will be posted either later today or by the weekend at the county website. If it is not posted there, on the county website will be a link to where it is posted. Any additional information which becomes available from the presenters here today will also have a link there. With that, once again, thank you for coming. We look forward to the continued engagement, unification, and working together so that we may continue to create a vibrant, resilient, and viable region. Thank you all.
If we can get a final round of applause, because he worked overtime as well, and he gives credit to everybody else. Supervisor District 2, Luis Blancarte. Thank you.